Narrativ.
This is a work of fiction created for entertainment purposes. Any resemblance to real events or people is purely coincidental.
We had a routine by then, not the kind couples brag about, the kind you stop noticing until you're already too deep in it to care. She'd take little shots at me, in the kitchen, in the car, at her sister's place on Sunday dinners. Never alone, though, always with an audience. That part was deliberate. She needed witnesses, people who'd smile nervously or laugh along so she could tell herself it was just a joke, that I was being too sensitive if I pushed back. I'd been an electrician for 11 years. Good at it. Steady work, decent money for Pittsburgh, enough to cover the rent on our place in Crafton and still have something left. She worked at Meridian Insurance downtown, had been climbing there for about 4 years. The job mattered to her in a way that started bleeding into everything else, including how she treated me when she felt comfortable enough to let her guard down. The shots had been getting worse over the last few months. More frequent, sharper. She'd catch herself a split second after and smile like it was nothing, but the words were already out there. I'd stopped letting them slide. Every time she threw one, I'd throw one back. Harder, better, cleaner. She didn't like that. She expected me to absorb it. When I didn't, she'd go quiet and cold for a day, then act like nothing happened. That Friday evening, she mentioned the company event, Meridian's annual fall gathering, held at a downtown venue. She'd planned to bring her friend from high school, a woman named Josie. Josie texted her an hour before we were supposed to leave. Stomach thing, couldn't make it. She stood in the hallway with her phone in her hand, already dressed, and looked at me the way people look at a last resort. You want to come? I was in the middle of restringing my acoustic in the living room. I set it down. Sure. She didn't look thrilled about it, which should have told me something. The venue was a converted warehouse space on Penn Avenue. Exposed brick, high ceilings, open bar. Her colleagues filled the room in clusters. She introduced me to a few of them, the kind of fast introductions where names don't stick. I grabbed a Coke and worked the edge of the room while she drifted toward her people. It started small. She was 3 drinks in by 8 o'clock, which loosened everything that usually stayed managed. A group had formed near the bar, 4 or 5 of her coworkers, a couple of their partners. She was in the center of it, which was where she liked to be. I walked over and caught the tail end of something she was saying about the weekend. She glanced at me, then back at the group, and shifted into that register, the one I'd learned to recognize immediately. He tries. I'll give him that, she said, grinning. Last Saturday, he spent 45 minutes trying to fix the kitchen faucet. Called me in to show me. It was still dripping. Light laughter from the group. I kept my expression flat. That's funny, because you called me in 3 times that week to explain how the TV remote worked. The laughter shifted, a little uncertain now. She gave me a tight smile. Her jaw moved the way it did when she was recalibrating. But she wasn't done. That was the thing about her. She never knew when to stop. 30 minutes later, the group had grown slightly. A woman I hadn't been introduced to had joined them. She was standing slightly apart from the others, drink in hand, watching the conversation the way someone does when they're listening more than participating. Later I'd learn her name was Vera Stone. She was my wife's direct supervisor at Meridian. My wife had her back to Vera and was building to something. I could see it in the way she was setting up the room, making eye contact with the people who'd laughed before, pulling them in. Honestly, she said, loud enough to carry, if anyone wants a husband, free of charge, I'm practically giving this one away. She gestured toward me with her glass, laughing. Boring, but loyal. Like a golden retriever that can't find the treat you threw. A few people chuckled. A few didn't. I didn't look at her. I looked at the group, one face at a time, slow enough that people noticed. Then I said, careful with the sales pitch. You're describing yourself as the previous owner. That's going to come up in the listing. The woman standing slightly apart, Vera, didn't laugh. She tilted her head, just slightly, and looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read yet. My wife's smile had gone stiff at the edges. The night wasn't over. Nobody stepped in. That was the part people don't talk about. The way a whole group of adults will stand there and let something happen because nobody wants to be the one who reacts first. She was still smiling, working the room with that version of herself she reserved for moments like this. The one that played it off as harmless. The one that needed the laugh to land so she could feel like she'd won something. I mean it, she said, doubling down. Somebody take him. He does dishes, takes the trash out. That's basically the whole resume. More nervous laughter. A couple of people had stopped engaging and were looking at their drinks. I looked at her with the kind of calm that isn't friendly. "You forgot electrician," I said. "Licensed, insured. $20 an hour skill set according to you. But funny how fast you call me when something stops working." She laughed it off, but it was a shorter laugh this time. That's when Vera spoke. She hadn't moved from her spot at the edge of the group. She still had her drink in her hand, same measured expression. She wasn't performing anything. She just said it, direct and unhurried, in a tone that made the whole circle go quiet. "I'll take him. Does tomorrow work?" 3 seconds of complete silence. My wife turned. She hadn't registered that Vera was standing there until that moment. The color in her face shifted in a way she couldn't control. Her mouth opened. Then she forced a laugh and tried to steer it back. "Oh, Vera. No, I'm kidding, obviously. He's good for some things." She lifted her glass slightly. "He still does the dishes. I just need him to handle the litter box better." Vera didn't smile. She looked at her for a moment, then looked back at me. "Sounds like he's been handling quite a bit, actually." The circle had gone very still. 3 people found reasons to glance away. One of her coworkers, a guy named Andrew who'd been laughing the loudest earlier, had his eyes fixed on the floor. My wife tried once more. One last attempt to flip it, to make it light again. "Well, I guess I still need him. He washes dishes well and takes out the trash like nobody's business." She laughed, but it came out a half-beat late. Vera tilted her glass slightly. "At this point, I'd say he deserves a decent massage more than another chore list. I happen to give a very good one. I think he'd enjoy it." No laughter. Nothing. Just the ambient noise of the rest of the party continuing on the other side of the room, indifferent to what was happening in this corner of it. My wife stood there with her drink and nowhere to go. The joke had turned around completely, and she was on the wrong end of it, in front of her coworkers, in front of her supervisor, with no move left that didn't make it worse. I looked at Vera. She was already looking at me. I said, "I appreciate the offer. Been a long few months." Vera nodded once, like that confirmed something she'd already worked out. My wife put her glass down on the nearest surface and pulled out her phone. I could see her composure coming apart at the edges, jaw tight, eyes moving fast. She typed something, then looked up at me with an expression I'd seen before. The one that said, "We are going to have a conversation about this." I was done having those conversations. I looked at her straight. "Don't," I said. "Not here. Not anywhere. I'm done." "Excuse me. You heard me. All of it, I'm done with it. We can talk about the logistics later, but the answer isn't changing." She stepped closer, dropping her voice. "You can't be serious right now. You're doing this here because of a joke." "It wasn't a joke. You know it wasn't a joke. You've been doing this for months, and tonight you just did it in front of your boss." I kept my voice level. "That's not on me." She stood there for 2 seconds, then turned and walked toward the exit, phone already at her ear. I heard her asking someone named Leah for a ride. I stayed where I was. Vera was still there. "Sorry you had to see that," I said. "I've been watching it happen for about 40 minutes, she said. "Don't apologize to me." She gestured toward a quieter section of the room, away from the bar cluster. "You want to get away from this corner?" I did. We found a spot near the far end of the room, away from the bar, away from the group that was still standing there pretending to have a conversation about something else. Vera set her drink on a high table and didn't fill the silence right away. That was the first thing I noticed about her. She didn't feel the need to manage the air between people. Most people do. They talk to cover discomfort. She just stood there and let it settle. "How long?" she said after a moment. "For years married. About 6 months of it being like that in public. And before 6 months. Behind closed doors. More manageable." She nodded, not sympathetically, just absorbing the information. "She's good at her job," Vera said. "Detail-oriented, competitive. Useful traits at Meridian. Less useful in a marriage, apparently. Depends on what she's competing against." Vera looked at me. What does she compete against? Whatever she thinks is threatening her. Tonight it was the idea that someone in that room might find me interesting. A short pause. "Someone did," Vera said. It wasn't flirtatious the way people perform flirtation. It was just a fact, delivered the same way she delivered everything else, directly, without decoration. We talked for close to 50 minutes. Not about my wife, not after those first few exchanges. We talked about Pittsburgh, about the way the city had changed in the last decade, about a renovation project she'd been overseeing on a property she owned in Lawrenceville. She asked about the electrical trade, not the way people ask when they're being polite, but the way people ask when they actually want to know. She had specific questions: permit processes, the difference between residential and commercial work, what the licensing path looked like. She was sharp, organized in how she thought. She'd make a point and then leave space for the next one instead of stacking everything on top of itself. At some point, I realized I'd been standing there for nearly an hour and hadn't thought about what was waiting for me at home. Around 10:30, I said I should get going. Vera took a card from her jacket pocket and set it on the table between us. If you want to talk more, outside of this context, that's a direct line. I picked it up. I'll use it. She didn't smile wide or make anything of it. Just said, drive safe, and turned back toward the room. The lights were on when I got back to Crafton. Both of them, living room and bedroom. She'd been home for almost an hour by then. I came through the front door, and she was on the couch with her arms crossed, still in the clothes from the party. She'd taken her shoes off and lined them up next to the coffee table, which she always did when she was preparing for a confrontation. Some kind of grounding habit. She looked at me. You stayed. For a while, yeah. With her. With several people. It's a party. Don't do that. Her voice was tight. Don't talk to me like I'm stupid. You stayed and talked to Vera for an hour while I had to lift home alone. You left. That was your choice. She stood up. You humiliated me. I set my keys on the hook by the door. Took my jacket off. She was waiting for me to react to that, to either apologize or escalate, so she could work with one or the other. I didn't give her either one. What happened tonight is what happens every time you do this in front of people, I said. The only difference is tonight it came back around faster than usual. I was joking. You know I joke like that. You weren't joking, and I'm not doing this anymore. She moved toward me, switching registers, softer now, hands coming up. Okay, I hear you. We can talk about this. We can fix it, There's nothing to fix. She stopped. I want a divorce, I said. That's not a threat. It's not a reaction to tonight. Tonight just made it easier to say out loud. The shift in her face was immediate. Whatever approach she'd been calculating dissolved. You don't mean that. I do. Because of one party. Because of some stupid joke that got out of hand. Because of 6 months of stupid jokes that got out of hand. Because of the 2 years before that where it was happening at home instead of in public. Because I'm tired. I looked at her. We're not good for each other. We haven't been for a long time. She stood in the middle of the living room, and for a few seconds, she didn't say anything. Then her eyes went sharp. This is about Vera. This is about us. Vera has nothing to do with it. She gave you her number, didn't she? I didn't answer that. She took a step back, and something in her posture changed. The negotiation was over. The grief was real now. Her chin moved, and her eyes went wet, but I could see the anger underneath it, holding everything up. You can't do this, she said quietly. You can't just end it. I'm not asking permission. I went to the bedroom, got a pillow and a blanket from the closet, and sat up on the couch. She stood in the hallway for a moment, then went into the bedroom and closed the door. I lay there in the dark and looked at the ceiling. First decent night's sleep I'd had in months. Saturday morning, she came out of the bedroom at 8 and found me in the kitchen making coffee. She'd changed clothes, washed her face. She looked like someone who hadn't slept and was trying not to show it. She sat at the kitchen table and watched me for a moment. I want to talk about last night. Okay. I think we both said things we didn't mean. I poured the coffee and set one cup in front of her. I meant everything I said. She wrapped both hands around the cup. You want to throw away 4 years because I embarrassed you at a party. I want to end a marriage that stopped working 2 years ago. The party was just the last item on a long list. She was quiet for a stretch. I could see her cycling through approaches, testing each one internally before deciding it wasn't going to work. I know I've been difficult, she said finally. Work has been brutal. Vera pushes everyone hard, and I've been bringing that stress home. That's on me. It is. So let me fix it. You've said that before. Not in those words, but the same idea. After your sister's birthday in March. After the thing at your co-worker Brandon's cookout in July. Both times it was fine for 2 weeks, and then we were right back. She looked at the table. This is different. It isn't. How do you know that? Because you're not upset that you hurt me. You're upset that it happened in front of people who matter to your career. I kept my voice even. That's a different problem than the one you're describing. She looked up at me, and for a second I thought she was going to deny it. Instead, she just held eye contact, and I could see the recognition in there. Brief, uncomfortable, quickly covered. So that's it, she said. That's it. She pushed back from the table and went back to the bedroom. The door didn't slam. That was almost worse somehow. When she went quiet instead of loud, it meant she was shifting into a longer strategy. I called a buddy of mine named Vincent Sawyer that afternoon. We'd grown up 3 streets apart in Brookline, worked the same apprenticeship program. He had a spare room in his place over in Beachview and had offered it before when things got bad, the way good friends do, without making it a big deal. I asked if the offer still stood. He said come whenever. I packed a bag that evening. Work clothes, tools, the acoustic, the essentials. Left everything else. She was in the bedroom with the door closed when I carried the bag to the front door. I knocked twice. I'm staying at Vincent's for a while. We can sort out the logistics through a lawyer when you're ready. Silence. Then, you're actually leaving. Yeah, just like that. It's not just like that. It's been a long time coming, and we both know it. Another pause. Then the door opened. She stood there with her arms crossed, and she looked at my bag, and then at me. If you walk out that door, I'm not chasing you. I know. I mean it. Don't come back expecting me to be waiting. I won't. She stood in the doorway while I picked up the bag and walked to the front door. I think part of her expected me to stop, to turn around, to give her something to work with. I opened the door, stepped out, and pulled it shut behind me. The air outside was cold and clean the way Pittsburgh gets in October. I put the bag in the back of my truck and sat in the driver's seat for a minute. Not second-guessing, just sitting with it. Then I pulled out of the driveway and drove toward Beachview. The following Monday, I called an attorney named Mr. Harmon, a referral from Vincent, a straightforward family law guy with an office in Shadyside. No dramatic late-night calls, no emergency consultations, just a regular appointment, 9 in the morning, the kind of thing you schedule like any other errand. He walked me through the process. Pennsylvania required a separation period. It wasn't going to be fast. I told him that was fine. I wasn't in a rush. I just wanted it done correctly. She called that evening. I picked up. You hired a lawyer. I made an appointment, yeah. Without even trying to work through this. I've been trying to work through this for 2 years. The trying is done. This is insane. You're blowing up our marriage over one bad night. I'm ending a marriage that had a lot of bad nights. The accounting just finally caught up. She went quiet. Then, I'm not signing anything. That's your choice. It'll take longer, but the outcome doesn't change. She hung up. I set the phone down on the counter in Vincent's kitchen and opened the fridge. He had a 6-pack of something local on the bottom shelf. I grabbed one and went to sit on the back steps. The city was quiet from up there. Just the low sound of traffic from the main road below, a dog somewhere a few houses down, the regular noise of a Tuesday evening in a regular Pittsburgh neighborhood. I pulled out Vera's card and looked at it for a moment. Then I sent a text to the number on it. Short, no theatrics. Free for coffee sometime this week. The response came back in under 4 minutes. Thursday works. There's a place on Butler Street I like. I'll send you the address. I put the phone away and finished the beer. The paperwork could wait. Thursday was 3 days away, and for the first time in a long time, I had something to look forward to. The coffee place on Butler Street was small, the kind with mismatched chairs and a chalkboard menu and no drive-through. Vera was already there when I arrived, at a table near the window with a ceramic mug and a folder of something she'd been reading. She closed it when I sat down. We didn't talk about the party. Not directly. She asked how the week had gone. I gave her the short version, moved out, contacted a lawyer, separation process started. She listened without interrupting, without offering opinions on things she hadn't been asked about. How are you with it? She said. Settled. More than I expected. That usually means you'd already made the decision before you made it. Yeah, probably about 8 months ago, if I'm being accurate. She nodded and picked up her mug. She's going to make the process difficult. I know. She doesn't handle losing control of situations well. I've watched her in the office for 4 years. She paused. That's not gossip. It's just relevant. I appreciate the heads up. That first coffee ran 2 hours. We talked about her Lawrenceville property, about a commercial job I was quoting out in the Strip District, about Pittsburgh's weird relationship with its own history. She was direct and funny in a dry way that didn't announce itself. She'd say something and let it sit there, and you'd catch it 5 seconds later. We met again the following week. Dinner that time, a place in Shadyside she knew. Then again the week after. Meanwhile, the separation dragged. My wife had taken the position that none of it was happening. She didn't engage with Mr. Harmon's correspondence for the first 3 weeks. When she finally did, it was through her own attorney, a woman named Ms. Briggs, with a letter proposing reconciliation counseling as a prerequisite to any further proceedings. Standard delay tactic, Harmon said. We responded that the filing would continue regardless. She called me 6 times in the first month. I picked up twice. Both conversations followed the same structure. She'd start with anger, move to appeals, then cycle back to anger when the appeals didn't land. The second call ended with her telling me she'd told her mother everything and that her mother agreed I was having a crisis and needed support. I told her to give her mother my best and ended the call. The third and fourth calls I let go to voicemail. I listened to them once, deleted them, and didn't respond. By the second month, she'd shifted strategies. The messages got quieter, more considered. She wasn't raging anymore. She was presenting a case. In one voicemail, she said she'd been doing a lot of thinking and had figured out why she'd been acting the way she had. She'd been scared, she said. Scared that I'd outgrown the marriage without telling her. The public jokes were a way of diminishing me before I could diminish her first. It was the most self-aware thing she'd said in 4 years of marriage. I listened to it twice. Then I called Harmon and told him to keep moving. Understanding why you did something doesn't undo it. That's not cruelty. That's just how accounting works. Vera and I had been seeing each other for about 6 weeks when she brought it up plainly, the way she handled everything. I want to be clear about what this is, she said. We were at her place in Lawrenceville, a renovated row house, clean lines, bookshelves that actually had books on them. Not to define it prematurely, just so we're operating with the same information. Go ahead. I'm not interested in something casual. I'm also not interested in rushing anything. Those two things can coexist. They can, I said. I'm not going anywhere. She looked at me for a moment. She's going to find out eventually, probably sooner than you think. Meridian is not a large company. I know. When she does, it's going to be difficult at work. For her, not for me. I want you to understand that. I'm not going to manage my life around her reaction. I wouldn't ask you to. She picked up her wine glass. Good. That was the conversation. No drama, no conditions, no negotiation. Just two adults deciding to be honest with each other about what they wanted. It was the most functional exchange I'd had with a woman in years. The divorce finalized on a Wednesday in late February, 7 months after I'd walked out of the Crafton house with a bag and my guitar. Harmon called me at noon. I was on a job site in the north side, running conduit through a ceiling. I stepped outside, took the call, said thank you, and went back inside to finish the work. That evening, Vera opened a bottle of wine she'd been saving. Nothing expensive, just something she liked. We sat in her kitchen and she cooked, and we talked about a trip she wanted to take to the coast in the spring and whether I'd be able to get a week off between jobs. Normal evening. Deliberately normal. That was the point. The Crafton house had been sold as part of the settlement. She'd moved into a 1-bedroom in Mount Lebanon, closer to the Meridian offices downtown. She was still at the company, still reporting to Vera. That part had not been discussed openly between Vera and me. It didn't need to be. We both understood the geometry of it. The spring trip happened. A week on the Oregon coast, a rented house 20 minutes outside of Cannon Beach. I brought the acoustic and played on the back deck in the evenings while she read. Neither of us needed to fill every silence. It was the first vacation I'd taken in 3 years that felt like one. I moved into Vera's place in Lawrenceville on the first Saturday of March, 3 weeks after the divorce finalized. It wasn't a big production. I had Vincent's truck, 2 loads, and by early afternoon, everything that was mine was inside. Tools in the basement, clothes in the closet she'd cleared out, guitar on a stand in the corner of the living room where the light came in good in the mornings. She'd made space without making a thing of it. We ordered from a Thai place on Butler Street that night and ate at the kitchen table, and that was it. No ceremony, no speeches, just 2 people having dinner in their home. The first Monday back at Meridian after the Oregon trip, Vera walked into the office the same way she always did. She was not a person who adjusted her behavior based on who was watching or what they knew. She didn't announce anything, didn't address it in a meeting, didn't send a company-wide email. She simply continued being the person she was, which included the fact that she was in a relationship with her former employee's ex-husband. The office found out the way offices always find out, gradually and then all at once. Her assistant, a young guy named Reed Odom, put it together first. He'd seen Vera's calendar, Noticed a recurring dinner reservation under a name he recognized from the prior year's event invite list. He mentioned it to someone. That someone mentioned it to someone else. Within 2 weeks, the information had completed a full circuit of the Meridian floor. She found out on a Tuesday morning. A coworker named Sydney pulled her aside near the copy room and told her, probably thinking she was doing her a favor. By the accounts that filtered back later, she stood there for a long moment, not saying anything. Then she went to her desk, sat down, and didn't speak to anyone for the rest of the morning. She had nowhere to put it. That was the thing. There was no target for the anger that would make her look reasonable. Vera was her boss. Making a scene at work was not an option she could afford. Quitting was not an option she could afford. Transferring departments required Vera's approval. She was in a geometry with no good exit. So she stayed. She came in every day and did her job and sat in the quarterly review meetings where Vera ran the room with the same even authority she always had. And she had to look across the table and absorb that information every single time. I heard some of this through Vincent, who still had mutual connections to people from her circle. I didn't seek it out. It just arrived the way information does when you've lived somewhere long enough. I didn't feel satisfaction about it exactly. It wasn't something I'd engineered. She had put the conditions in place herself, one public joke at a time, and the consequences had simply followed the geometry of her own choices. I hadn't planned any of it. I just stopped moving out of the way. About 4 months after I moved in, Vera and I were at a hardware store in Bloomfield on a Saturday morning. She was sourcing fixtures for the second floor of a property she'd just acquired in Polish Hill. I was pushing the cart. She was reading the specs on a pendant light and asking me questions about junction box clearance. A woman came around the corner of the aisle. We saw each other at the same moment. She looked at Vera first, then at me, then at the cart between us. The ordinary, domestic reality of it, the Saturday morning, the hardware store, the fixture in Vera's hand, landed on her face all at once. Vera glanced up from the spec sheet, registered the situation in about 2 seconds, and looked back at the fixture. "This one works," she said to me. "The clearance is fine." "Good. Grab 2. She took 2 off the shelf and set them in the cart. The woman in the aisle hadn't moved. She was still standing there, holding whatever she'd come to that aisle for, and I could see her working through what to do with herself. I looked at her. "Hey," I said. Not cold, not warm. Just a word acknowledging that another person was standing there. She said nothing. Vera set her spec sheet on top of the fixtures in the cart, and we moved on down the aisle. She didn't bring it up until we were in the truck heading home. "You okay?" she said. "Yeah." She looked out the passenger window at the Bloomfield storefronts going past. She looked like she wanted to disappear. "She'll be fine." Vera didn't say anything else about it. She pulled up a playlist on her phone, and we drove back to Lawrenceville through the Saturday morning traffic and talked about which wall the fixtures would go on and whether the second floor needed a full rewire or just an upgrade to the panel. Regular conversation. Regular Saturday. That was what the end of it looked like. Not a confrontation, not a final speech, not a scene in a parking lot. Just 2 people running an errand, and a woman in a hardware store aisle holding something she'd come to buy, watching the life she'd underestimated walk out the other end. She'd put me up for auction in front of a room full of people and her own boss. Turns out the bid was accepted. She just wasn't the one who made it.
So let me get this straight. She put him up for grabs in front of a room full of people, including her own boss, thought it was funny, and then watched that same boss go home with him every night for the next year? I mean, you really can't write this stuff. Except, well, we did. Look, the takeaway here is simple. When you keep testing someone who never actually breaks, don't be surprised when they just leave, quietly, and move on better than you expected. Respect isn't something you demand after the fact. You either lead with it or you don't. And she chose not to. Anyway, if this one hit, drop a comment below, let me know what you thought. Hit that like button, it genuinely helps, and I'll see you in the next one.